Good morning. I'm Lynn Snej, Director of the Arts and Culture Center at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to today's arts panel, Breaking Bread, Food in Times of COVID-19. This panel is part of our ongoing arts online programming, bringing you panel conversations and podcasts on important topics around the arts and culture in the Middle East during these challenging times. Food has historically had such a central role in Middle Eastern cultures, synonymous with hospitality, sharing, and generosity. It is the first thing we miss when we are away from home, and one of the strongest things that binds us together as people and communities. Few things have the same power as food to bring us together. Today, our panel is looking at how, during this unprecedented period of global lockdown and anxiety, food has emerged as a central player, a source of comfort and community building for some, and for others, a great source of anxiety, given the growing economic instability caused and revealed by this pandemic. So many of us have rediscovered the joy of home cooking, and we have seen a proliferation of recipe exchanges, while others have had to turn to food banks for support. With a focus on the Middle East, today's panelists will look at how this pandemic has led to a revival of traditional food practices and recipes, and discuss more sustainable ways of growing food in response to increased pressure on hard-hit communities. How might this pandemic change our relationship to what we eat and how we grow it? To address these and other questions, we have a remarkable roster of speakers for you today, who I want to thank for joining us. Our moderator, Antonio Tahan, will introduce them briefly to you in a minute, but before I pass this on to him, a few housekeeping notes. We will be taking audience questions the last 10 to 15 minutes through Zoom's Q&A feature, which you can all see on your screens. For those calling in by phone or watching our panel on the live stream, you can ask a question on Twitter to our handle @MEI Arts Culture or email events@mei.edu. If you have any technical issues, please email events@mei.edu. With that, let me turn back to our panel and introduce our moderator today. We thank him. He's leading us today into this conversation. Born in Venezuela to a Middle Eastern family and growing up in Miami, Antonio Tahan draws inspiration from a variety of cultures. After his studies at Cornell, Tony was awarded a Fulbright research grant to Syria in 2010. Where he studied the midday meal in 3 contexts: at homes, in restaurants, and in the streets. From cooking to eating, food was a natural vehicle for cultural exchange and one that he continues to explore. From his current home in Baltimore, Antonio documents recipes and stories from Aleppo and his many travels, bringing people together online and in person around the love of food. During the COVID pandemic, Tony launched a web series called Teta Thursdays, a virtual conversation on food, culture, and identity. Teta means grandma in Arabic. Every week, he interviewed food writers and researchers who specialize in the food culture of the Arab world. Antonio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lynn, for the wonderful introduction. I'm going to start by introducing our wonderful panel. We have Kamal Mzawak, who's joining us from his home in Lebanon. Kamal is the son of a farmer. In 2004, he established Beirut's first farmers market, Souq El Tayyib. Today, it's a social business that has grown into a food movement throughout Lebanon. Through his work, Kamal aims to preserve culinary traditions and sustainable agriculture in order to bring the country together around its cuisine. He is the founder of Taule, which means table in Arabic, and it's a restaurant that it's a restaurant cooperative that showcases regional flavors, and Beit, house in Arabic, which opens beautiful historic homes devoted to architectural and culinary traditions. In 2016, Kamal received the prestigious Prince Claus Award for his work and vision. He is famous for the sentence, "Make food, not war." Welcome, Kamal. Mirna Bamieh is joining us from Palestine. She is an artist and a cook who uses food in her artistic practice. Mirna founded Palestine Hosting Society in 2017 as an extension of her art practice that often looks at the politics of disappearance and memory production. Mirna creates artworks that unpack social concerns and reflect on the conditions that characterize Palestinian community using food. The Palestine Hosting Society is a live art project that investigates food practices in Palestine. The project brings back dishes to life over dinner tables, walks, and various other interventions. There's no single place where stories are created and shared more than around a dinner table. Welcome, Mirna. And we also have Aisha Fadallah, who is from Kuwait and moved to the US when she was 18. She comes to Baltimore by way of Milwaukee and Portland, Oregon. Since moving, Aisha has engaged with Baltimore's refugee community as a mentor and interpreter. She is the co-founder of Baltimore-based Mera Kitchen Collective, a community-driven food-based cooperative focused on empowerment of refugee and immigrant women. Mera Kitchen Collective has hosted women chefs from around the world to include Syria, Eritrea, and Sudan. For Aisha, stories are powerful in understanding the past and changing future narratives around refugees and immigrants. In addition to her roles with Mera, Aisha also serves on the Baltimore Community Advisory Board for the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. We're excited to have you, Aisha. She's down the street from me in Baltimore, but we're here through Zoom. So I'm excited to have this conversation. And we're going to jump in by talking about traditional food practices. A lot of traditional food practices from the region are very time intensive. Whether you're rolling a big pot of grape leaves, you're shaping kibbeh, or preparing yogurt from scratch, we're seeing more and more people willing to take on these complicated and long form food projects during quarantine. So I want to hear about how you're coping. What have you been cooking in your homes during this pandemic, just to start off the conversation and paint a picture as to what this pandemic has been like for you. And we'll start with Mirna.
Unmute. Hey, Tony.
Hi.
Well, I have been spending lots of time in the kitchen like everyone else during the lockdown, but I've been mostly focusing on, at the very beginning of the lockdown, I was focusing on building my pantry. So I was taking all the pulses, the lentils, and trying to, and making sure that I have enough in case I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning, everybody was afraid of a war situation, and especially Palestinians. Our default mode at such cases is total lockdowns, where there isn't enough food for everyone. We have 2 intifadas and more, where we always go to that mode. So we rely a lot on the pantry. And I think everybody, when this uncertainty of the virus surfaced, we all went and stocked on dry food, lentils, grains, beans, everything you can think of that does not go back with time. After that initial phase, I was focusing more on fermentation, and I was trying all those food preservation techniques that prolongs the time or the life of fresh produce, because first of all, they are delightful to eat. And in case we don't have the fresh produce, we will have the pickled ones. But as well, because I wanted to contemplate more on time. And during this lockdown, I wanted to somehow reflect on how those tastes changed, but as well how my body is reacting to this lockdown period. So it was mostly among fermenting jars and all over the place.
Some of the things that you fermented early on?
I ferment, or I pickled string beans, carrot with olives and walnuts, lemons, but as well as stuffed chilies, makdoos, and I will be sharing the last recipe that I fermented with you at the very end of the interview.
Wonderful. And you know what I love about this is that these traditions aren't necessarily new. Palestinians and many folks around the world have been using these traditional food practices for millennia. Have you come across other preservation techniques that you've integrated in your daily life during pandemic? Not necessarily fermenting. Is there other things that you have resorted to? Other preservation techniques?
You mean techniques? I mean, I've been experimenting a lot with kefir water, which is a fermented drink, and I brought the grains back with me from Warsaw, but I haven't used them, and I thought they were dead after 7 months of neglect because of my travels. And then I thought maybe if I feed them, they will resurrect, and that's what happened. So I've been experimenting with lots of flavors for the kefir water, but as well I was being playful with spices and herbs that I add to the ferments. I've been focusing a lot on yogurt fermentation as well. Now that the weather is hot and beautiful again, I can do kishik, and I do shanklish and all those yogurt-based fermentations. But as well, I started a new batch of misos. So I want to start fermenting beans, and I haven't done that before. So I brought some koji beans grains with me, and I started my first batch of miso. So I'm being playful with fermentation, and I think the lockdown gives me all possibilities and the space to do that.
I love that. Thank you. And Kamal, we'll go to you. So you founded Souq Tayyib, Lebanon's first farmers market. What types of foods are you seeing? What types of food are you eating at home? But also I want to know, what are your producers making, given that the ability to sell is limited during the pandemic?
Well, producers, Lebanon is a Mediterranean country, so producers are making all typical Mediterranean produce. Lebanon is a very small country, but still has different climates. So it goes from coastal plains to mountains to inland and the Bekaa Valley. So it's all these different geographies that have different climate, different soil, and different agricultural production. So this pandemic arrived obviously in Lebanon after a catastrophic economic collapse and the revolutions that started since October 17. So we were already in total catastrophe. And then this pandemic arrived, so it didn't help at all. And the pandemic arrived in Lebanon and everywhere in the world in spring, which is a very important season for the producers. So we have been, the farmers market didn't happen since early March, and we hope that the first one will be not this Saturday, but mid-June, like Saturday, June 13th, I hope.
Are you still able to preserve some of the harvest, even though the market isn't running?
No, because producers some of them are able to sell their produce by delivering directly to certain customers or selling in certain places, but most of them cannot. And a lot of the produce are being just discarded.
Oh, wow.
Or given away for free. But like this is a very important time of the year where producers make an important living in this time.
Yeah, I can imagine that's very rough. Especially like if only you can the access to the produce to make like the moune and the preservation, but a lot of that I'm sure is difficult with everyone staying at home.
It's not time for moune yet. Moune is more like by the end of the season nearly. So some things can be preserved now, but
Okay.
like not a lot.
Like what things are your producers preserving now, or versus what will they produce? What will they preserve later?
Well, what is produced now is very little. You know, you cannot preserve greens. Let's say you can pick za'atar thyme and do the za'atar. For instance, you can preserve vine leaves, but like you don't need a ton of vine leaves. It's not, you know, very important. There's no jams, no pickles yet. There's no beans or grains. Like all of this is going to come by the end of spring and by the end of summer even.
I see. All right. Well, thank you for painting that picture. And I also turn to Aisha. On the onset of the pandemic, I know that Mira quickly pivoted, and now you're providing meals to many vulnerable communities across Baltimore. Tell us about how your menu changed, because I know before the pandemic, you had a stand at the farmer's market. You also were doing catering, but now you had to reimagine a menu for this pandemic. What is the new menu like, and what kind of dishes meet the demands and the constraints of the pandemic?
So we wanted to provide dignifying food. By this, I mean something that's nutritionist, that is healthy, and that the same quality as we have provided before. Our kitchen has many chefs from different backgrounds and different nationalities, and specialize in different cuisines. So before the pandemic, we kind of did infusions, and we continue to do, especially with the scarcity of produce that we have sometimes. Even if we have a planned menu, sometimes we go to the store and to the producers, and we don't exactly have all the ingredients. So our chefs has been very creative in working with whatever produce that we do have. For example, we'll have saffron rice with beans, or adobe chicken. So one of our like Mexican chefs would do the adobe chicken, and one of the Syrian chefs would do the rice. So it's been a time to push creativity and a lot of like intercultural exchange, and still trying to provide same quality food as we did before.
And you're at Chef Iman's house right now?
Yes.
So she'll be joining us towards the end. Chef Iman is from Syria, and she'll be joining us to provide a recipe. I'm excited about that. Are you finding that a lot of the ingredients that you're like normally used to cooking with are more scarce? I know that a couple weeks ago, Chef Iman made kibbeh el-rahib, which is just a potato-based kibbeh that's stuffed with onions and lots of sumac. What are the ingredients that you're used to getting, and how has it been difficult given the pandemic?
Meats has been the hardest to kind of find and resource. Otherwise, some weeks rice has been very available, but our chefs are specific of what kind of rice and what kind of grain. So that's been a challenge, finding the exact brand or the exact type of grain that we're used to cooking with. So we had to kind of be flexible, and it's not exactly as we hope, what is the quality that we wanted. But as you said, it's been a lot of learning and experimentation. I was like, this is the only rice I could find. I went to all the stores possible, and this is the only thing. So we have to work around it.
What rice does Chef Iman like? So Chef Iman's from Syria.
أي رز بتحبي؟ Basmati, and has to be a long grain basmati. If it's any shorter, she's like, no, it doesn't work. This doesn't work. But yeah, as I said, like the chefs at the kitchen has been very creative and willing to work with whatever is available.
I was fortunate enough to get to try the kibbeh al-rahib, and it was absolutely delicious. I had never had it before, and I'm thankful for that. So I will say that in times of crisis, it does put a lot of pressure on food security, access, and sustainability, particularly among vulnerable communities. Each of our panelists, through their work, leverage food as a tool for empowerment. Kamal, I know you're an advocate for sustainable food practices across Lebanon. You hire a lot of women to produce at Souq al-Tayyib, at your restaurants. How are your businesses pivoting as a result of this back-to-back crisis that you mentioned earlier, both the economic crisis in Lebanon followed by the COVID pandemic?
Pivoting is a kind word, I would say. Like, we're just trying to not die and just trying to survive. So you're talking about restaurants. I'm always amazed. Like, we use the word kitchen. We don't have restaurants. We have kitchens, and kitchens where the guardian of tradition work. And these guardians are women and are home cooks and not male professional chefs, in white jackets in a restaurant. So it's not about food as a competition. It's food as sustaining life from who gave life. So from 6 kitchens that we had to close one of these kitchens in Hamra. We closed it like a month ago, and today we are selling all objects and items of Hamra, and it was like the worst day in my life. So this is one. Number two, since the revolution started, we started to cook. We used to have since Tawle started 10 years ago. We used to have a soup kitchen that we do every week, once a week in Tawle, in the original Tawle in Mar Mikhail in Beirut. But since October 17, we started working in different neighborhoods in Beirut. And every time we'd be bringing people from different conflicting neighborhoods, let's say, women working together in a kitchen and feeding people. Then the pandemic started and we couldn't do this anymore. So we had to feed what we call the frontliners, the medical workers, the doctors and the nurses. And we shifted our soup kitchen to cook and to serve Red Cross volunteers who are in quarantine after serving in a while and being contaminated or not, and frontliners as nurses and doctors. So in times of catastrophe, we always need to adapt and be creative. But I think you can do this like once or twice, like in a month, but like when you constantly need to do it, like maybe on a daily basis, it gets to be like a little bit tough, and at one point you feel yourself like you're just drained and you don't know what to do anymore. So there's this to take care of, and there is like more than 100 producers who sell at the farmers market, and if they do not sell this week, they lose their crops, and they lose what they have of the week, and they don't have money to live the week after. So this is a very big responsibility too. And there is the women, the cooks that come and cook every day at Tawle. It's a rotation, it's a different woman, it's a different cook every single day. So if they don't come and cook today and make their salary, their pay of the day, which is like a half a month's salary or something like that. So it was, all of these responsibilities at the same time. And the fact of saving ourselves, each one of us, and saving or keeping our teams safe, from the pandemic. So it was sometimes a lot to handle. And at the same time, we just created a week ago in Beit Duma. And since October 17, we thought like, oh, okay, it's a bed and breakfast only. But you know what? Maybe people are not going to come and just sleep here in 5 or 6 rooms. Let's take off one room, and let's use a wonderful garden, and let's make a Tawle, what you call restaurant, what you don't call restaurant. So we can have like more people and generate more income. So at the same time, you need to be creative. At the same time, you need to kill, Tawle al-Hamra at once, and, at the same time, give birth to another Tawle in Duma. So it's quite intense, let's say. And Lynn, sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, go ahead.
Lynn was talking in the beginning, like, we usually problems were a staple of the Middle East. Maybe when you hear the word Middle East, you think of wars and conflicts and problems. But like now, it's like everywhere. It's not ours only anymore. So I don't have to complain. It's everybody's problem. Maybe we have a little bit more with our economic collapse, but like, where you're in shit, if you're a little bit more, like, it's the same.
how are you getting support and funding for the Frontliner meals? And how has the community been coming together around that effort?
Extraordinary. We just use social media. We just posted on social media and people gave. We even have, members of our team, who are on half salary, for instance, or more or less sometimes, who have families, and even these people donated money for the frontliners. Other people who are better off maybe gave too, so we had money mainly from Lebanon and from many people from abroad too. So we just had people tipping in, and we wanted people to tip in with, if they can, money, or, if you have a lot of apples, send 2 boxes of apples, or, if you can buy 2 bags of rice, send 2 bags of whatever you can. There's one lady who took, for instance, in charge the production of the cake on a daily basis during all of this time. And she was doing the desserts, on a daily basis for everybody. So everybody tipped in as he or she could or wanted.
That's fantastic. That is one of the silver linings of times of crisis, that you see this coalition of people from the community come together for good. And I know actually Mira has a similar story, Mira Kitchen Collectives. And one of the things I love about Mira is that you're constantly navigating what it means to be a socially conscious business. So Aisha, I was wondering if you can share how Mira Kitchen Collective centers equity and empowerment in its business model, and how has that, or hasn't it, evolved in the current context?
So before the COVID has started, Mira is a co-op. That means every individual has a share in the business and a voice in the business, and that's how we can create empowerment. The first week of when the COVID started, we have lost a lot of, we promised people work. A lot of caterings were coming up, and we have lost all of them. So we had the responsibility as a company, as we promised to keep those jobs, to keep people employed. At the same time, there was a great need in Baltimore. Food insecurities in Baltimore is it's big. Before the COVID-19, 1 in every 4 individuals were food insecure in Baltimore. So imagine the exacerbation of people losing their jobs, of children not being fed in schools. So we have received a lot of requests to provide free meals from community organizations. So we just put a GoFundMe, and then, as Kamal said, people were very generous and still been supporting us. We have provided more than 20,000 free meals to individuals across the community. And, as you said about equity is a majority. We employing people as who employing people that need jobs and otherwise would not be receiving any government aid or don't have access to government aid. We have opened our kitchens. We don't have enough staff to we're delivering around 500 meals a day. So we opened it to other restaurants that are laying off their employees and that their employees don't qualify specifically for unemployment. So that's in the sense, because we as Mira, we have grown because the community has believed in us and has helped us. And if we rise together. So the idea is not only to keep our people employed, but how can we take a part in Baltimore and try to help other restaurants in Baltimore to keep their people working. And that's why we're working with Alma Cocina and Nepal too.
That's great. It's 20,000 meals it's remarkable, and it's very heartwarming. And I know I want to also turn the conversation as well to Myrna, because we all know that Palestinians are not strangers to difficult times, whether it's curfews or supply chain limitations. You talked a little bit earlier about the intifadas. So what practices would you point to that build resilience in the face of these challenges? And also, if you could talk to how do you connect food, identity, and resilience through your own work?
Well, I will start by saying that the way that food builds resilience is in the way that it connects people. And all the time has changed now, and somehow this virus is different. You cannot measure it, or you cannot compare it to a political crisis or a wartime. It's on another level, and it's still unfolding. We're still, it's still the beginning, or it's so confusing for everyone. That's why food is becoming this medium where everybody is going to take refuge and to nurture their bodies, but as well their souls, because it's comforting. I think what I'm focusing mostly in my work at such times is somehow reclaiming this wisdom of scarcity, and how did our ancestors, grandfathers, and grandparents did adapt to such times where there was scarcity and there wasn't total or full control on what you can get or what will you get. So you cannot you don't have this freedom of movement. You have no control over your time, your body, the future, the present, everything. So how can food be this place where somehow we come together as people, as community, but as well, now that the crisis is global, how can we all as humans come together and somehow reclaim what those things that have been lost with the passage of time and crisis in general, whether it's the things that we imposed on nature and the things that we can reverse somehow through the way that we approach life, and we approach and appreciate the things that we took for granted, and food is one of them. Well, with the lockdown, my project has been affected, as everybody, especially that my project is an art project, so it doesn't have this community. I don't have a community kitchen, so I don't have a service that I provide, and my kitchen is my own personal kitchen. So I've been using social media platforms as a way to share more and to bring awareness to topics that concern scarcity and food wisdom, and how can we, how can we use everything and not waste produce, because waste produce. And I've been focusing more on knowledge and what can we learn from time when it comes to food.
I know I turned to your account. Yeah, I was very excited. I want you to talk a little bit about, I turned to your account when I always learn new things about Palestinian food culture that I had never known. You recently did an art project on the foraging for wild greens, and just the information that came out of that was wonderful. And I was hoping if you want to share a little bit about that project.
It's the research and the project happened last year, almost at the same time as the lockdown this time. So it was one of the moments that I was missing a lot, this freedom of going to the mountains and picking the wild plants and, cooking with them and using them in different dishes. And huerne was one of them, because I couldn't go out and I couldn't pick huerne. So I couldn't make, preserve it in yogurt. And it's one of my favorite plants.
What is huerne in
the only one. What?
Huerne in English, for those who haven't had.
It's hedgehog. It's mustard hedgehog.
Yes.
If I'm not wrong.
I knew it was in the mustard family. Yeah.
Yeah. Hedge mustard. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I haven't thought about the name of huerne in such a long time.
And how is it preserved? Do you want to talk about the
Because you cure
here?
you cure it with salt, and then you preserve it in yogurt, and it gets better and better with time. And when I was in Warsaw, actually, I learned a recipe where they use kale and preserve it in yogurt in the same exact way that we preserve huerne. So there's endless possibilities that somehow everything connects, like the way that we bring nature back to our homes, and how this passage or this route of nature to the home somehow becomes a space of healing and reclamation as well, of what we lost with the passage of time and modernity and industrial revolution and everything. And it all this wisdom comes out of necessity, and during such times of crisis, I think everybody is more attuned and they listen, because knowledge was always there in one way or another, but our reception and how much can we listen and implement and somehow really take that knowledge and take it in. It only, you only need it. When you need it, you will understand it and use it. So yeah.
I think that's wonderful. And for those who are interested, I'm pretty sure you save a lot of these on your as stories on your Instagram. So if anyone is interested in Huerna, I remember when Mirna was preparing it, and she has it saved as a highlight on her Instagram stories.
And this lockdown period as well has been really rich for me in writing, because I've been writing a lot, and I was trying to understand the fermentation processes and bacteria and the microorganism, but through my life under the lockdown in quarantine. So it is a very particular situation that I would never think that I would perceive myself as a person in a jar, and then understanding, life through those walls. So yes, those processes and those approaches and this tuning in, somehow is being really helpful. We're all slowing down, and we're being attuned to things that we didn't have time to before.
Yeah. And I could go on. This is like a very fascinating topic. Or one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is the word culture that goes into a lot of these fermented products. And there's a beautiful poetry about how these microorganisms get passed down from generation to generation, whether we're talking about sourdough or whether we're talking about the culture in yogurt. I think there's a beautiful poetry in that. But so I also want to talk about the idea this disruption provides an opportunity for us to think about food systems and vulnerabilities in a different way. So how might our relationship to food change as a result of everything we're going through? And Mirna, to continue the conversation from a cultural and community perspective, how would you like to see this pandemic affect our relationship to food and our cooking habits?
Well, the effects are different. Well, first of all, we all have more time, so we're going back to the kitchen. Even people who did not need to cook before or didn't feel that they have to learn are going back to the kitchen and trying to experiment more, because we all feel like in order to survive, we need to be able to feed ourselves and feed those people around us. So that's one. But as well, I think we're all more alert, and we're all anxious about what's to happen, whether is it an economic fall, a famine, hunger, wars, we don't know. Everything is up in the air and all options are there. And somehow we need to build this resilience, this personal resilience. And for that, food is one medium for that. We need to survive. It's one of the most important things. We need to in order to live, we need to eat. So how can we feed ourselves at such times? That's why I think everybody was eating so much at the beginning, because of this anxiety of falling hungry later on. it's refreshing as well to see how inventive people have been during Easter and Eid and all those occasions where people usually gather and share meals around one table, and how they were somehow trying to create those connections, virtual connections. But I think it was not about the food, but it was the space of the table that somehow needed to extend in order for us to live, to survive, for our, for our souls to flourish in the mid of this crisis. So it's beautiful just to monitor how every community and every nation is trying to create those connections with food. And each country is having its own story with the lockdowns and opening of lockdowns. And so it's quite interesting to monitor from behind the screens as well.
I'm sure. Yeah. It's very hard to predict, I'm sure, what is going to survive this, what practices are going to survive this pandemic. I know a lot of things are constantly changing. Mera Kitchen Collective has gone through several iterations since it was founded. Earlier in the conversation, I alluded to the fact that you guys are a catering company, you have a stand at the farmers market, and today, as you talked about earlier, Aisha, your Mera is providing thousands of meals to those in need in underserved Baltimore City communities. What have you learned through this experience, and what does the next iteration of Mera Kitchen Collective look like after the pandemic?
Well, we have learned that the whole restaurant system business is inequitable. Restaurants usually have 3 days of cash that is enough for them to survive. So a lot of restaurants are closing in Baltimore because they don't have enough capital to keep them going because there's no work. And that tells us how the restaurant industry has one of the lowest profit margins. The profit margin is 8 to 10%. And that's very low if you pass any crisis, you are actually behind in paying your bills. And that make us think about how can we shift the whole system, because the restaurant system haven't been working before the pandemic. So I think it's an opportunity for restaurants and this whole system to be shifted. Because when we think about restaurants, this is where we go to celebrate. We go to have meal, to gather with friends and family. It's a place to build community. And sadly, we don't give it the dollar value that it deserves to continue. A lot of restaurant workers have minimum wage due to the industry and the injustice in the industry. And a lot of restaurant owners, the rents are too high for them to make any profits or pay people in dignifying salaries. So I think for us, we're imagining how can we shift that. We're thinking about providing how we can provide free meals in the long run, and not only through the pandemic, and not only providing free meals, but providing free meals that is dignifying. So the same meals that we sell, to kind of change the mentality of free meals or of giving. When people think of giving, they think they want to go to the lowest dollar, right? The cheapest food that we give away. We all deserve dignifying food. And that's the shift that we are thinking about.
I have noticed through your Instagram, the photos of the meals that you're providing to these communities. As you mentioned, they're not just random tidbits from the kitchen. You have a variety of proteins. You include fish and chicken and where are you sourcing a lot of those ingredients from?
Now we're sourcing them from the same places that we are sourcing them before, from farmers, from the Restaurant Depot store. So now there's more variety. I feel like in the beginning of the pandemic, people ran to the store and finished everything, and now I think the now it's getting better where we can find the ingredients that we want. And exactly, those meal cost us exactly what it used to cost us before. So we're not changing how much it costs just to produce more meals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know. Also, I want to make sure this hour has gone by very quickly. I want to get Kamal's perspective on this because I know Kamal, you are always advocating for food sustainability in Lebanon, and this pandemic in particular has highlighted the limitations of our globalized food system. What are one or two productive changes you would like to see that come out of this crisis?
I think the economic collapse in Lebanon preceded, and like we lost, it's like the Venezuela case or the Greece case, we lost the money in our banks, we couldn't import anything anymore, and we understood how much is produced locally versus imported, and how much is important, how important it is to produce locally. And this is what we have been advocating since ever. So Qutaib is not, a market just to sell cucumbers and tomatoes. It's a space to say that, production, you don't need only to develop cities. The more you develop cities, the more you need to feed these cities. And these cities would be fed from rural agricultural areas. So development has to be equal between here and there. We have always been advocating that, food is not a commodity product on a supermarket shelf. You don't need to make, into brackets, money and go buy, into brackets, food. Food is not something you buy. Food is something that's produced, planted, harvested, or cooked and produced, And if you cannot do it yourself, at least know who's doing it. Let him or her be the closest to you and have a direct contact with he or she who is planting or producing your food. So it's all of these ideas together. And, it's the economic collapse and the pandemic have been somehow, a blessing to support local and sustainable production systems. What will remain out of this, I don't know. Today, everybody wants to cook because, it's fashionable to cook. It's more of a foodie's attitude rather than, a real sustainable attitude or sustaining attitude or needing attitude, and people are planting too, but how long will it last? People usually have short memory. So we cannot predict, we just need to wait and see. And meanwhile, we need to make the best possible to change these trends into habits and not just have them, just trends to post on Instagram when we have time to cook and others have time to look at what we're doing and we brag about it, and have it more as a real understanding that will perpetuate later on.
Do you feel that a lot of, I think for me, when I hear what you're saying is also like there's an experience tied to buying locally. It's not just about the food itself. Like the entire experience is better from supporting the farmer who produced the meal to the taste. Can you talk a little bit about how the taste is impacted when you get something that was locally produced versus something that was, picked when it's not ripe and shipped to another country?
It's not rocket science. It's very simple. If I have cherries in my garden just below where I'm sitting, like if I just pick it and eat it, it has a taste. If it's 1 day old, it has a different taste. If it's 2 weeks old, it has a completely different taste. So the taste is different, nutritional value is different, the energy of what we're eating is different. Like everything is different. So it's not rocket science. It's just simple common sense, I think.
That's absolutely right. And while we still have about 10 minutes left, I also want to make sure that we have questions from the audience. Let me see. During this time, many have been turning to food for comfort. Could each of the panelists share a dish that they consider to be the ultimate comfort food? I actually think, we also have some of the panelists are going to share a recipe, and we'll start with Kamal, since you're on the screen. Do you want to share a particular recipe or something that's comforting?
Well, it's a recipe I'm going to give, it's tabbouleh. It's my favorite dish. Obviously, the real tabbouleh. I'm a tabbouleh crusader, so the real tabbouleh with a lot of parsley, a little bit of burgol, not couscous, And my recipe is going to be more bitching about the wrong tabbouleh rather than just a recipe. And there's a recipe too.
I know in the US, I cringe every time whenever I see tabbouleh with way too much burgol. It breaks my heart.
Or with shrimps or cucumber, It's like, this is like a salad, a mix of something, but it's not tabbouleh.
I have a question, a secret. So do you, so some people I see soak the burgol for the tabbouleh in lemon juice and some people soak it in water. What is your recommendation?
If I have clean burgol, it's definitely not in lemon, because the lemon you have to add only at the last minute.
Okay.
When you mix all your ingredients together well, and at the last minute you would add lemon and olive oil, because when you add lemon and olive oil, your tabbouleh is going to start to cook. What I say cook, like wilt and like not be good. And the tabbouleh should be super fresh. So it's only the last minute thing. If you don't have, obviously it's fine burgol, not coarse burgol, because you just need to soak it with some liquid and add it to your tabbouleh. If you have not very fresh burgol, well, better to wash it once or twice, rinse it well and squeeze it well, then put it in your bowl first. If you have clean burgol, I would just put it in my bowl first. I chop very fine, dice very fine my tomato, and I put my tomato and the tomato juice over the burgol, so it will soak the tomato's juice.
Oh, I like that.
Never lemon. It's part of the
I was
crusade.
about to ask you.
No
I was
lemon.
about to ask you, Kamal, about this, because I soak my burgol in the water from the tomatoes. So I wanted to see if you approve of that or not.
Yes, madam, you're doing the right thing. You're blessed. You can go rest it.
Mirna, let's go to you. What is a recipe you'd like to share?
Did we talk about this during the Teta Thursdays? Mine is rizzo laban. It's just plain rice with vermicelli with shariya and yogurt, plain yogurt. It's my comfort food. It's what I can digest when I'm stressed or not feeling good. It's the only thing that I can eat. And my favorite dish is maqloube with eggplants. So I think I love rice. It's usually rice-based dishes that I love.
And you highlighted your mom making her maqloube, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Aisha?
I'm gonna switch it to Chef Iman. She's gonna share a recipe. All right. She's coming.
So Chef Iman is one of the chefs at Mira Kitchen Collective. She's Syrian from Sham. كيفك إيمان? I'll do the time.
أخبارك؟
الحمد لله. بدنا نعرف وصفة اللي بدك تشاركيها مع الناس.
أيوة اليوم بدي أشارككم اليوم بالليمون والنعناع.
So she wants to share a special lemonade that's with lemon, obviously, and mint. كيف تسويها؟
لازم مشان ما يصير لونه هيك على غماء أو سواد، لازم حط الليمون، النعناع والثلج وأخلطه شوي، وبعدين أضيف الليمون والسكر.
Oh, so she talks about how in order for the color not to get too dark, she crushes the mint with the ice and then adds the lemon and the sugar at the very end. شكرا كتير لك.
حبيبي الله يسعدك يا رب. شكرا.
And I also want to share one of my favorite recipes. Mirna talked about yogurt. We all know how important yogurt is in the region. So I've been making during quarantine yogurt in a clay pot. And so the benefit of the fukhara, the clay pot, is that it absorbs, well, first the thermal conductivity of clay keeps it cool, but it also keeps it warm during the incubation period. So if you have something warm, it'll stay warm. And if you have something cool, it'll stay cool. But also because it's unglazed, the residual water that comes out of the yogurt during the fermentation process gets absorbed into the clay pot, and you end up with a wonderfully thick and creamy yogurt. I will share a basic yogurt recipe if you don't have a clay pot. you could still make it at home. It's very easy. It's a fun project to do during quarantine. And then you could even continue doing fun things like straining the yogurt to make kurat al-laban, little labne, which are wonderful for breakfast. I'm going to try to answer a few more questions. Someone asked for kibb al-rahib. We will make sure to include that recipe. All the recipes will be on the Middle East Institute's website, so you can go there. To Mirna, given that the pandemic has created a focus on agriculture, local production, sustainability, was there a greater awareness on the need to restore / obtain heirloom seeds in Palestine and perhaps create more heirloom seed libraries, such as the one initiated by Vivian Sansour?
Well, I hope so. I mean, we cannot know now for sure, because as Kamal said, now it's just trending and everybody's going to the kitchen because everybody's cooking and everybody is planting the garden because everybody's doing that. So I hope that it's not just a trend, that people actually, after this lockdown is open or it finishes, people will not just leave their plants die. And I hope they will learn. I mean, everybody now is planting what they need in the kitchen. So not really the heirloom seeds. They're not because they need, you know, like special care and more space than what we have in our houses. But more people, most people are planting parsley, coriander, mint, things that we need in the kitchen, the greens that we need in our kitchens regularly. But I'm hoping that in the future this will just bring a spark of appreciation and to all the plants and the heirloom plants and seeds that we can actually plant in our gardens, maybe the wild plants as well, to learn their names, their uses again. So I hope this lockdown will just, you know, like spark for something deeper in the future.
I hope so too. And Vivian Sansour's work is amazing. I love the global sense of community. I met Mirna once. I know Aisha, she lives in Baltimore, and I never met Kamal, but we've connected on social media. So I've enjoyed interacting with everyone on the panel in some capacity, even though we're all in different parts of the world. I'm going to answer a quick question from Randa, a question about what kind of starter I used in my yogurt. Unfortunately, because I didn't have any other starter, I had to use store-bought. So I encourage everyone, if you buy plain store-bought yogurt, as long as it has live active cultures, which is the bacteria that's necessary to turn milk into yogurt, you'll be fine. So you could use your favorite flavor. I would buy a few different types of plain yogurt, taste them and see what you like. And then from that point on, you could just keep using the yogurt that you make. You save a little bit at the end. This is a great question from Susan to Kamal. How can the trend towards cooking at home be encouraged and sustained? You know, I know that a lot of people, the biggest complication is time. People don't have the time to sit down and do a lot of these time-intensive dishes. How do you sustain this beyond the quarantine?
Well, do you raise your own kids or you give them for someone to raise? Do you take care of your own life or you have someone, you know, a doctor or a priest taking care of it? And cooking, it's the same choice. You don't have time. Why don't we have time? We should think of our priorities. What are our priorities? Only running to make more money, to spend more money buying things. It has been 2 or 3 months. We bought nothing at all, or maybe some people very little online, you know. And I think we're surviving well. So it's like just, we should continuously, you know, think of our priorities, and our priorities are going to change all the time. So what are our priorities? Taking care of myself and my family. It starts by feeding myself and my family in a correct way, which is cooking for them. You know, cooking is about survival. I eat because I want to survive. And war is about survival too. I don't kill the other one because, you know, I don't like the color of their hair or their skin, but because I'm afraid of them. So I feel like I need to kill the other for me to survive. So it's always about survival. So when you understand the importance, I'm not talking about, culture, I'm not talking about tradition, I'm not talking about all these other aspects. If we look at it only as survival, we understand the importance of cooking and feeding myself and my family. And I think we should just review our priorities.
I think that's very well said. And I will also piggyback on what Kamal is saying. A lot of these traditional dishes, you don't have to, even if you're getting introduced to it, you can do it over time. I know with my friends, I spend one day every week or every 2 weeks, and we pick one dish that's very time intensive, whether we're rolling grape leaves. We do that a lot with my friends here in Baltimore. And you'll notice that when you sit down and do these time intensive traditions, you connect.
It's meditation.
Absolutely. You connect.
It's a yoga class. You don't have time because you have to go to your yoga class. You have to roll your mat and run in the street, grab a cup of coffee to be a real New Yorkie, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't have a yoga mat, you're not, an urban. So no, you don't need to do it. I spent 1 hour this morning not doing meditation, but peeling artichokes. It was 7 a.m. I was alone at home, and it was just some kind of like meditation. I wasn't looking at what I was doing. I was thinking, I was reflecting. It is some kind of meditation. And then this is how you started your introduction, Antonio. And, I don't know if it's a good thing to say it's time intensive. Some things are time intensive, but every single dish that is time intensive is things that we have to do together. Ma'moul, we get all together and we do them. Kibbeh, you do not do alone. We get all together and we do them. You don't roll vine leaves alone. We get all together. So it's like, instead of going to a bar or, to I don't know where to spend our time, let's spend it on doing something productive. And from the other side, there are a lot of dishes that are not at all time intensive. You can buy like a bunch of spinach, rinse it well, saute it with a piece of fish or naan, like there are many, many different cuisines and Oriental food, Middle Eastern food that is very easy. And today food has no border anymore. Like all our recipes are mixed, like just do what you like, what is easy, and that's it. It's nothing more than that.
Like Mirna talked about the Huerne version using kale. That's incredible. Well, we're all out of time. This hour went by incredibly fast. I wanted to thank all our panelists again, Aisha Fadallah, Mirna Bamye, Kamal Mzawak. And I also wanted to thank the Middle East Institute for hosting this wonderful conversation, and to everyone who participated. And we look forward to continuing the conversation online through social media. So connect with us. Bye, everyone.